Be seated. Thank you. So, I guess if you can hide it, paint it red. I'm sitting on a bar stool this morning. Not for the usual reasons that one would sit on a bar stool, but if you were here last Sunday, you saw me do a rather interesting, yes, thank you very much, gymnastic. In fact, Jim, when he came through the line on Sunday, he said if I'd done a somersault, he'd have given me a 10. So I just want you to know, everybody was really concerned because they thought I'd fainted. But if I'd fainted, I'd have gone over like a tree. But really what happened was I lost the feeling in my right leg from the hip down. And I just decided to go with it and lean into it. And I gracefully fell down. You all had your eyes closed for the treatment. And when you opened them, I wasn't here anymore. I was on the floor. So rather than, go into a long explanation, I have a pinched nerve in my right leg. And we're trying to determine the origin. I had some x-rays and stuff. So I'm actually very fine. Just walking a little cautiously these days and trying to figure out exactly what's going on. I have a knee replacement and a hip replacement in the same leg. So something is not interacting well together, but I'm knowing absolute perfect health and perfect resolution to it because I've been sent to the right and perfect people who know how to do those kinds of things. So I want to say good morning to everyone who might be on the live stream today and who was on last week. Surprise, surprise. Our theme for the month of December is retreat. And this, as a spiritual practice, is something that I do engage in on a fairly regular basis. And I'll be exploring this month the different ways in which we can use retreat or create retreat, not having really to go anywhere to do it. Ernest Holmes quite adamantly tells us that divine guidance does not exist for a few people and not for others. Otherwise, that would mean that spirit is finite. And my demonstration of good in my life is not greater than anyone else's good because I am more divinely guided than someone else. My demonstration occurs simply because I have a greater degree of receptivity to this idea of divine guidance than perhaps someone else does. And that's the idea that we want to teach in the science of mind, is how to expand this idea of receptivity. Because the challenge for us is never really in the giving, it's always in the receiving part. Because it has everything to do with our self-worth and nothing to do with our self-worth. It's the dichotomy of what we believe about our self-worth, or what we believe we've been told about our self-worth might be more accurate. Divine guidance has to exist for you and for everyone, or not at all. That's just the bottom line. Just as electricity exists for everyone's use, the same idea works. This is an all-encompassing idea of a supreme being at my beck and call, and it's almost too much for some of us to grasp. That the God of my understanding, the God of our understanding, would want to shower its blessings upon me. Why? What have I done to deserve that? Well, the reality is we don't have to do anything to deserve it. It's just ours by divine right. With the idea of electricity being ever present and always at our disposal, if we don't plug into the wall socket, there will be no light. That's the metaphor. We walk around with the lamp in one hand and the cord in the other hand, and we're asking, what should I do? What should I do? And all we have to do is plug into this divine guidance, and something happens. Something wonderful happens. When we turn to Spirit for the solution to our problems, Spirit answers by intuitively knowing not the problem, but the answer to the problem. Because there is no problem at the level of Spirit. The moment we begin to embrace this idea of turning to Spirit for the answers, we have created a sacred space in our lives. It can be any time, it can be anywhere, and it can be as simple as coming to terms with a challenge that we're having, particularly by just simply saying, oh, well, I know there's a way. I know there's an answer. And in that release, if you will, the answer does come. In that perfect moment, I know that all fear, all uncertainty, and all doubt is set aside because I know that the law of God is perfect. This coming Friday night, we have an opportunity, all of us, to create sacred space as a community. Reverend Patrick Cameron is coming from Edmonton, Alberta, and he is going to do a healing circle, a process with us in a healing circle. And a couple of people here have been privy to some of the work that he has done, and he's just a phenomenal person. First we'll eat, then we'll pray, and then we'll love each other a whole lot. Get the theme? Yeah, get the theme? Eat, pray, love. That's the way that we're going to do it. Yes, it is cute. If you haven't RSVP'd yet for this event, please do so today by calling the center and just letting Linda know. We need a head count for the preparation of the food and to prepare the handouts. You know, as our consciousness lifts itself above any and all challenges in our lives. Now, this isn't simply just for the center this Friday night. This is for anyone here who may be experiencing a challenge of any kind. Bring it into this healing circle, because the power and presence of the number of people who show up here will simply dissipate the negative energy of whatever problem might be consuming you in the prison of your mind, as Reverend Les alluded to, or bring your own delight to this evening, and then that energy will also be encompassed by everyone here. And as our consciousness lifts itself above any and all challenges in our lives into what Ernest Holmes calls a spiritual affirmation, a spiritual atmosphere of affirmation, the problem disappears and the answer takes its place. That's just how it works. Every problem that we might have contains within it the answer. If we think of the problem merely as a question or an inquiry and not an obstruction. Now, this is an important part of our teaching, that the problem is just merely an opportunity for us to question where we might need to make some changes or some shifts in our lives. My friend Shirley Berman, who is the caterer for our dinner on Friday night, is a prime example of someone who stepped away from the problem, looked at it closely, and used prayer and meditation to find a solution. Her son Ian has a debilitating, he has debilitating seizures. And he is a candidate for stem cell replacement, which may lessen the severity of the seizures or eliminate them completely. We don't know. The process is costing $15,000. And Shirley cooks and caters. We needed a cook and a caterer for our event. So how could we make this work? She has totally gifted the entire meal preparation, set up and clean up to our center. And in return, our entire tithe for the month of December will go to the Fund Me account for Ian's stem cell replacement therapy. Now, this is a way in which she discovered a solution for her son, because she doesn't have the money to be able to do this for him. And anyone who wants to contribute separately can do so as well. And in fact, the Board of Trustees for the center doesn't know this yet, but instead of giving them tchotchkes for Christmas, I am contributing financially to this fund on their behalf. So Shirley did something incredibly wonderful. She ceased to function at the level of the problem and began to function at the level of the answer. Now, for most of us, this is really, really what we need to do. We can all do that. No matter what the issue is in our lives, what the challenge, when we begin to focus on the solution, it is certain that the answers will come. Looking at the problem doesn't change the problem. It just enhances it. It makes it more. Now, Ernest Holmes says we don't deny that there's a problem, but we deny the power the problem has over us. That's what the ideal would be. We are not presenting God with the problem. God has no problem. Principle has no problem. God knows intuitively, and the principle of divine guidance, the sacred space, works automatically in our acceptance of the solution. Ernest Holmes tells us to bring our hopes and our aspirations to the divine center within ourselves. Lay them on the altar of our faith in complete confidence, like Reverend Les said, and create sacred space. Think of something in your life right now that may be at issue. It could be a relationship that needs healing, or a money situation, or a nagging health challenge, or an application or maybe a desire for a new job, for instance. And indulge me for a moment and go within and listen to Ernest Holmes' words for a second. If you'll close your eyes, you might get a better sense of what it is that Ernest was saying. He said, "The spirit within me knows the answer to any problem which confronts me. I now turn from the problem to spirit, accepting the answer. I turn from any thought of confusion to a consciousness of peace. I know that the Spirit of God is within me, and the law of God is around me. I know that the answer is here and now. It is within my own mind because God is right where I am. In calm confidence, in perfect trust, in abiding faith, and with complete peace, I let go of the problem as a problem. I receive the answer as fulfillment." And so it is. Now, my friend Dr. David Bruner says that we don't get to that holy place within ourselves until we're willing to release all that we are not, or all that is unlike who we really are at the level of spirit. He also said we need to pray for bigger problems, because God doesn't show up with a solution when we operate from a place of contentment. You know, I get that. When I heard that, I immediately went into denial, though, about the idea of praying for bigger problems. But after a little analysis, I realized that the bigger the challenge, the bigger and better the solution. If I'm only mildly distressed, is it worth the effort to meditate and to pray and to read spiritual materials? If I am only marginally miserable, is it worth the effort to change my patterns of behavior, to think more positively and to be kinder? Maybe, maybe not. No one has ever come to me for spiritual counseling because they were contented with their lives. No, not ever. A few years ago, I was asked to create my standards of integrity for a workshop that I was involved in. And in order to do this effectively, I had to choose 8 people in my life I admired who exemplified certain standards of integrity. And those would be those particular people would be the guidelines for my standards, because I couldn't recognize them in them if I didn't already have them in myself. It's a great exercise for anyone to do to see where you are. My first person was my dad. My dad personified honesty, sometimes to a fault. His candor was not always refreshing, but he was a very, very honest person. Next was Mother Teresa. I picked her for her selfless service. The next one was my friend Maria Nemeth. she exemplified generosity. Edward Viljoen, a wonderful minister up in Santa Rosa, California, was playful. I liked that about him. The Dalai Lama, I loved everything about him that was spiritual. Ellen DeGeneres had a great sense of humor. I loved that about her. Richard Rohr, who's one of my most famous authors, a Franciscan priest, my most favorite authors, he's creative. So those were the ones that I chose. And last but not least was Dr. Ernest Holmes, because he was a visionary. So these were my chosen standards of integrity: honesty, selfless service, generosity, playfulness, spirituality, humor, creativity, and vision. And everyone can do this for yourself. And out of these choices, you will surely demonstrate the gifts you have so others can prosper in your presence. That's really what this is all about. It's not for us to begin an exercise like this to keep it for ourselves, but to move it out into our world in a beautiful way. Because you will have created a sacred space that you don't have to create boundaries around. It doesn't have to be a special room with a special chair in a special place. It is something that we take with us wherever we go. In his book, Learning to Fall, Philip Simmons speaks to the idea of creating space. Because he was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, he knew that the progression of his illness, he knew about how the illness progressed, and he feared that, he said, the day would come when he would be unable to lift a spoonful of lime jello to his lips. And he said that we all stand at the edge of something, when we feel the presence of what has gone before, and when we sense the onrushing promise or threat, in his case, of the things to come. Creating sacred space has to be a present moment experience, and yet, as Simmons says, it has become an endangered species. You know, most of us don't know how to create sacred space. We hit the floor running in the morning, and at the end of the day, we're so exhausted when we go to bed that there doesn't seem to be any time for us to create sacred space. And yet, more and more, Philip Simmons said, I find that dwelling in the present moment, in the face of everything that would call us out of it, is our highest spiritual discipline. I couldn't agree more. Like he does, I believe it is our salvation. It is our connection to spirit, and therefore our connection to one another. You know, last night I was at a party where there were many people from the center, and I sat and observed the community. And there wasn't one person who wasn't smiling. There wasn't one person who wasn't having a good time. There was conversation that was silly. If I closed my eyes, I could hear intermittent bits of laughter and silliness. And it just made me feel as though we all belong to something bigger than a one-person issue. And this is creating sacred space. It's just so wonderful. Even the simple logistics of meditating every morning at 7 o'clock for me, I know that there are several million other people doing it at the same time. And that's a powerful, powerful concept to think about. I am not alone in this idea. There are lots of things in life to scare us. So it requires an extra dose of finding that sacred space within each one of us that is never worried or scared or unhappy, and focus at least some of our attention on the true reality on a daily basis. There is enough weirdness in the world to distract even the most stalwart among us. Weirdness is an opinion. Those folks I deem as weird could be happy as clams with their way of life too. And when I accept that, I am truly living in my own sacred space. You know, what I know about this center and the people in it is that there is love here, with a capital L and with a small l. There is love and friendship. There is love in the way in which we treat one another. There's love in the way in which we laugh at one another's silliness sometimes. Falling on the floor would have been a good time to laugh if you weren't all so scared. But, being scared periodically brings us up short. And for me, I was a little scared for a moment too. I actually went to that place, what if? What if I lost the use of my right leg? What would I do? Well, they make wheelchairs for that. People get around beautifully in wheelchairs. And as I thought about my friend Joe LaSalle, who's in a wheelchair and has been in a wheelchair for a very long time, I thought he's one of the happiest people I know. So he's not limited by his physicality, not limited in any way. We are not limited in any way, shape, or form. We are only limited in what we think about what's going on in our lives. Again, when we bring our hopes and aspirations to the divine center within us, laying them on the altar of our faith in complete confidence, we know unequivocally that with God, all things are possible. Will you join me in consciousness, please? And so as we go within to that perfect place of peace, we are creating sacred space. In this present moment, there is only the one power, the one presence, the one divine idea that is longing to make itself known in our individual lives. And that one idea is who we are and how we show up at the level of spirit in our daily lives. I recognize today that in this month of December, it is about giving and receiving. It is about being present for those who may need our presence. It is about understanding healing for those in our circle of influence who may need to have something in their lives healed. It is about our practice as religious scientists because we know the truth that God is all there is, even in the face of that which appears to be contrary. And so I know today that as I give over my cares and my concerns, my fears and my uncertainties, and I release those to a greater idea, I know that there is something incredibly positive and life-affirming that is waiting to take their place. Knowing that I cannot think more than one thought at a time, I choose today to think only positive, life-affirming thoughts. I choose today to set aside any criticisms or judgments that I may have, because I know that that criticism and judgment is not levied toward anyone else. It is something within me that needs to be healed. There's a greater idea that gets to be revealed. And so I know for each and every one of us today that there is an opportunity to stand in truth, and to know that love is the animating factor in everything that we say and everything that we do, today, tomorrow, and forever. And so knowing this to be our truth today, I lovingly and joyously release my word to the law, knowing that pure spirit, that one divine idea known as God, is that same divinity that is within me. And I am divinely guided and protected in ways known and unknown, as we say together, and so it is. And we have music from Mary.